And we're live. Good morning or good afternoon to the US. My name is Dominic. I'm looking after the operation side of things at EX Journal. I was going to be here with Karen, but unfortunately Karen can't make it today. Karen, our editor. So I thought I'd ask Mike to join us.
Why can't Karen join us?
Karen actually has a school event for her children. Their children have won some sort of prize, which is, I guess, a good thing.
That seems fair enough.
Yeah. So this is Mike, who will be my guest today to help us launch EX Genome, which is the first ever open source question set and framework for employee experience. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Mike?
I'll just do the very, very short version. Look, I'm a contributor to EX Journal. Did some work on the EX Genome project, so I know a bit about that. And also I'm the co-founder of Joyous, and we're one of the companies that sponsored EX Genome project, as well as we're the first, I think we're the first to, or the only one at the moment using it commercially.
Yeah,
so
correct.
We have a commercial license on that.
Great. So how about we just have a look-see into what the employee experience genome is, what it can do for your company, and what it does differently from existing frameworks.
Sure. Look. Like I said, I've kind of had, I guess, some involvement in this project, and certainly the person that owned this project, a woman called Laura Jane Booker, started by doing a lot of research on what the kind of existing frameworks were for measuring things like employee engagement and employee experience. And I'm sure most people on this podcast would have come across that before. But the kind of the little history that she summarised for me is such a good one, is that basically the history of employee engagement surveys is very much one of questionnaire-driven PowerPoint generation. Right?
Yes.
Right. So you send out a bunch of questionnaires to staff, asking them lots of questions about whether they enjoy working there and all sorts of different things, whether they like to have apples for breakfast, and it goes into some kind of proprietary black box, like some black box which is which the vendor has sold you, and it has some kind of hidden science in that, and then the output of that is some kind of presentation to your executive. And the idea, I guess, of EX Genome project was to actually just kind of open that box, right? Just to say, okay, well, how do we actually make the science just super clear, so that everyone, whether they're an HR leader or a people leader or a worker, can understand how you measure employee experience, how you look at that stuff. And then the cool thing is it's been open sourced, right? So I don't know how many people are do you know much about open source?
Not a whole lot. I know that basically you can, under the GNU General Public License, you can use things without having to pay for it, but I'm not fully aware how that entire open source thing would work in a HR framework.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because it's normally applied to, like you said, that's a software kind of application.
Correct,
of it.
yes.
But this is basically, the work has been done, and then anyone can use that in any way they want to, even without attribution. Although I think that the EX Journal guys prefer attribution, but the thing is that the reality of it is that means that lots and lots of people use it, but lots and lots of people can kind of edit it, see how it works, contribute to it, and so on. And so there's a ton of contributors to this project, right? I think that there's 20 or 30 kind of people in academia and thought leaders and practitioners and so on who've contributed to it. So it just benefits from that piece. And so just to kind of I guess delve into the actual details of what it's about and how it works. It's really measuring employee experience and measuring employee engagement, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think I'll talk in a moment about the model, but it is one of employee experience are all the things that you experience at work, and employee engagement is really how you feel about work.
Oh, okay.
Right. So one of the things, and I think this is my favourite part of this project, is the way it deals with leadership. Mm-hmm. And so if you think about employee experience, as being all the experiences that people have, at work, right? Well, almost all of the employee experience is the outcome of some kind of leadership decision at some point.
You would certainly expect so, yes.
Yeah. So as a leader, I do something that kind of impacts the way that employees experience their job, and so you typically there is this, I guess, well-established idea in a lot of these kind of surveys where they go, okay, well, what we want to do is that because leadership is such an important part of employee experience, we're going to focus on leadership behaviours. Leadership behaviours are things like trust or modelling the way and those sort of things.
But it seems like a very diffuse sort of concept, right?
Well, this is exactly the point, right? So in the work of on the EXGP, what you find is that actually employees aren't really that interested in leadership behaviours. They're interested in outcomes for them.
Something that is tangible to them, I guess.
Yeah. So examples that they gave in the research is that things like job security are important to employees, and things like having clear objectives are important, and so on. And so those really are outcomes of leadership rather than leadership itself. And so the question set does a very good job of actually measuring the outcomes of leadership rather than measuring leadership itself. So you kind of can infer leadership from that.
Okay.
But the really nice thing about that is it avoids asking kind of blunt questions about leadership which hurt people's egos. At the same time, it kind of lights the way. So if as a leader, my team says, well, I'm not set clear objectives. Well, guess what? I can just go and set clear objectives, and I've kind of improved the employee experience without the way has been lit for me to improve.
That makes sense. Yes.
So the other thing too, on question design, and this is a thing which I never really realised, but if you look at the science of building this stuff, the tradition has really been around what I describe as focusing on the organisational psychology piece of it. Mm-hmm. So in that world, it's very important to get the wording of the questions scientifically correct so that your measurements are perfect, right? But that ignores this whole cognitive piece of it, which is that actually when you ask questions, they have a normative effect on behaviour. So the questions themselves actually describe the kind of behaviour that you're looking for. And so if you, for instance, ask a manager or a leader or a member of their team, maybe ask them something like, I am fairly recognised for the work I do, and then say, I have been recognised for these different things. Well, that actually reminds everyone in the organisation that recognition for effort is an important thing.
I guess that reminds both the employee and their manager. Yes, correct.
Yeah. So that's right. It should actually drive the manager behaviour, right?
Yes.
It should actually make managers go, oh, okay. Well, this is how I'm now gonna behave in the future. And so there's a real normative effect to the questions. So all of the questions in the EX Genome project have two parts, right? So the first one of them is what do you describe it? It's like a phrase that you kind of agree with, and that phrase is a simple statement of ideal employee experience, right? So I feel comfortable sharing my ideas and opinion, and you use that for measurement, right?
So it always asks towards the positive end of the spectrum?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So this part of it is very, very much like, let's show what great behaviour good employee experience looks like, and then we'll get to people to agree or disagree.
I guess it makes sense to ask, what do you like most about your job rather than what do you hate most about your job? Yes.
Well, I'll come back to that though, Dom, because it's an interesting point, right? Because then you want to go and ask some kind of text question or some question that will stimulate feedback. And this is kind of a feature of modern approaches, is you actually want to stimulate kind of textual feedback, because we can analyse textual feedback these days, which we couldn't do sort of 30 years ago when the engagement industry started.
Let's be honest, we couldn't have done it 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's true. So you want to stimulate deeper expression of what's actually happening. But also this thing about the history has very much been about what we describe nicely as kind of critical. Constructive criticism, say, right? That questions oriented people towards giving constructive criticism. You might say that questions oriented people towards having a whinge, but actually, the idea was that let's see some things which are wrong so we can fix them.
Yeah.
But that's really only half of the world of feedback. So quite specifically in the EX Genome project, half of the questions are designed to look for negatives or constructive criticism where we can do something, and then the other half are really just designed to generate positive feedback. And
Because who doesn't like positive feedback,
Well,
right?
that's true. So positive feedback's addictive, right? We're all addicted to positive feedback.
Hey, my image on Facebook got 18 likes.
Yeah,
It's that sort of thing. Yes.
18 would be a record for me. But but that is true, right? So it's like this thing of going, okay, well, we want to generate positive feedback because it's good for people, but actually it reinforces behaviour, right? So if you're doing stuff that's right, it's also good to get the feedback as a leader or other people in the organisation that you are doing stuff right. And so this is the absolute favourite piece of this, and I was talking about the cognitive psychology versus the org dev piece of it. It's fascinating. You really just need to make the questions super simple, right? Yeah. So talking to Laura Jane about this, the questions in EXGP are all designed around a reading age of 6 or 7 years old. Right?
Oh, wow.
Right. And now that's not to say that everyone's team has a low reading age, but there's a few really important things about having very simple language, right? So the first one is it's much less open to misinterpretation, right? And traditionally, questions in these things were actually quite complex often. So not open to misinterpretation. Everyone reads it faster, but most importantly, it's actually much more inclusive.
I guess speed is a big thing. When I moved here from Europe 15 years ago and picked up English as my second language, I would find myself on rather English Wikipedia. I would find myself on simple English Wikipedia. It makes perfect sense because it just improves the reading speed. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I find it hard to believe you've only been speaking English for 15 years. So this is the thing, right? It's not just for people with English as a second language. There's lots and lots of reasons that you want to make it simple. And one of the big ones is inclusion, though, right? So that piece of if I don't feel comfortable with English, then simpler language makes me included. Whereas if I have complex language, I'm kind of excluded from the process, which is the opposite of what you're trying to achieve. The other piece of it too, though, is that it makes it easier to translate into other languages in a way that's comparable too. And so this is being translated through the open source project into Spanish at the moment, into French. It's been translated into different languages. So very quick look at the model, because I think it's always important to understand that piece of it. And what happens with the way this works is that employee engagement is a good predictor of business performance, right? And so, there's lots and lots of chatter about correlation and causation in this particular topic, but we'll talk in a second about how employee engagement leads to better business performance. And then employee engagement is really influenced by the experiences that people have at work, right? And we break those experiences up into the culture and environment, fairness and inclusion and well-being. And so what I'm going to do now is just go into each of those topics while we have a bit of time. So the first one is engagement, right? This is the outcome of your employee experience. So engagement tells you about people's emotional commitment to the business, right? It's the way you feel about where you work, and I've heard it described in lots of different ways. One of the commonest ways of describing it is it's the amount of discretionary effort that you're willing to put in.
So basically, the percentage that you're prepared to go past going by the book. Essentially. Yeah,
I think that's a nice way of putting it. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So if the phone rings at 2 minutes to 5, and it's when I
the
go
classic,
home.
Yes.
Yeah, and if I'm not emotionally committed to the business, I just let it ring, and if I am, I pick it up and try and do something. And so employee engagement drives business performance. It's a great predictor of business performance because engaged employees they deliver better customer experience. They work harder and more productive.
And they stick around for longer.
Yeah, exactly, right. And sticking around for longer has the benefit too of improving productivity and customer experience. And basically, if you get great customer experience, you'll get customer preference, you'll get better business performance.
That makes sense.
And so, nothing particularly new in that. The way that this is measured is through, I guess, the simplest methodology that exists for measuring this these days, which is based on the work of a couple of Dutch researchers called Schafali and Bakker, and it's very kind of established this piece, right? You measure dedication, energy, and immersion, and basically you'll either have employees that are disengaged or employees that are engaged, and some kind of spectrum of them, and it's a useful outcome measure of your employee experience. But the bit which the Genome project does really well is it delves into the employee experience that basically leads to that. So I mentioned the 3 topics. The first one is culture and environment. And culture and environment is all of the stuff which is external to me as an employee, right? So it's the world that I get to work in at work, and so it's really constructed out of a couple of different sets of what we term resources, right? So there's physical resources, which is easy to understand.
That's the obvious one, yes.
So whether I have the right kind of laptop. And then there's the social and psychological resources. So do I have autonomy? Are my expectations clear? Am I aligned? Those kind of things. And that basically creates the environment that I work in. And so these are important things to look at, right? So we look at people's level of responsibility, their clarity in their role, how they fit into the broader objectives of the company, and then their physical environment.
Physical environment basically being like, I'm able to go to my work on the 18th floor without having to take the stairs because there's a lift that works most of the time.
Yeah.
That sort of thing?
Yeah, well, that sort of thing. I think the kind of specifics tend to be around the tools I need to do my job, right?
Okay.
And so, if you're an office worker, a good example of this might be, what your laptop is like. And so, and this is the sort of thing where if you're thinking about employee experience at a design level, you need to make these kind of trade-offs, right? So you might buy people laptops which are much, much cheaper, but actually it significantly impacts their experience. And that's a trade-off that you can...
If it takes 5 minutes every morning to boot up, that's something that's intensely frustrating, not just for developers.
Yeah, well, it's
Absolutely.
it's not just you lost 5 minutes, it's you started the day frustrated.
Exactly.
Right? Okay. So the next piece is on fairness and inclusion, and this is really one of my favourite topics to come out of this. And really, what this says is that this is the comparative stuff. So this is the bit where I'm comparing how I am, experiencing work with how others of a similar position get to experience work. And so it's interesting because what the research highlighted is that actually it's the kind of foundational stuff. Right, so if you go to work and you don't feel that you're treated fairly, then actually nothing else matters, right? So if you feel that other people get recognition and you don't, and these sorts of things, then basically you stop putting in effort.
So you're suggesting that is something that is not only on a male, female, young, old, white, black kind of spectrum, but also basically how is my colleague who is basically the same age, the same gender, everything as me, who sits next to me, how he is getting remunerated, how he is getting recognized by the management and stuff like that?
Well, it is that sort of thing, but it's also just how much of a sense of belonging I have. So am I included in the team or excluded from the team? Do my opinions count as much as someone else's opinions?
Am I being asked to join for lunch and stuff like that?
Yeah, those sorts of
Gotcha.
things. So if that stuff is missing, then very little else matters, and that's why it's sort of sitting there on the bottom of the pyramid. And so there's the fairness piece, which is about are you fairly recognised, fairly rewarded, etc., etc. There's a sense of belonging, which is are you part of the team? But then there's also the sense of opportunity. Do I have the same opportunities as other people in the organisation? Whether that's opportunities for personal growth or so on.
Or have I been skipped for a promotion for the last 12 times?
Yeah, without that being explained, right?
Yeah.
And then the last piece is well-being, and so if we talked about your culture and environment being the external stuff, and fairness and inclusion being the comparative stuff, well-being is much more the internal stuff, right? And the nature of well-being is really become more and more important to people, but less and less clear to people at the same time, would be my kind of summary of the last little while. Because
given that the work-life balance becomes more of a work-life integration, I can well understand that. Yes.
Absolutely right. And so I think that you've had this thing for a while, which says that or this idea that well-being is. Yeah, so I think it's written up here, right? The presence of illness is not the same as the absence of positive well-being. So well-being is important to all workers. This is not just about identifying people who have some kind of illness. And so the idea is that you actually have a spectrum where some of you've got languishing over here, and then at the other end of the spectrum here, you've got people who are flourishing. Yep. And the idea of great employee experience design is to try and move people to the right. It doesn't matter where they are, you just want to move people to the right. You want to have people that are flourishing, people who feel positive and function well. And the theory behind that, not wanting to delve into too deeply, but this is well illustrated in the paper, is that there is the core of the well-being that you can influence as a employer is just the work-related well-being, right? Mm-hmm. So the work-related well-being, you're helping employees balance the demands of their job with the resources you give them. That's the simple summary of it. So if I'm a call centre operator, one of the demands of my job is that every day I answer the phone and I'm as cheerful as possible.
Yeah, you can't be grumpy on the phone.
Yeah, so I've got to be cheerful. And I'm a human being, so some days it's much harder to be cheerful than others, right? And so that's a demand of my job, but a resource I might have to deal with that demand might be that I have, a manager who is empathetic and will help me. Will help me in my work, or understands I need to take breaks, or understands the stresses of it.
Or even just recognizes it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, having a manager that comes by and goes, "Hey, what's up? You're not looking so happy today," is a big vehicle towards remedying that issue, right?
Yeah, and I agree. So it is I guess a case of you have a set of demands of your job, and then you have resources to deal with it, and the balance between those two things creates your well-being. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at that in summary, basically you have three different areas of it, right? One is that you have your workload, how you balance your kind of your work life. One is that you have how supported you feel, supported in your environment, and then finally your security. So that's things like, do I feel safe, or also do I understand that my job's going to be here in a few days? And there's a nice picture of Jason Lawrence in there, who's one of the contributors to the thinking around well-being, and he really pointed out that if you get well-being wrong, it's very, very hard to get great performance out of someone who's just languishing, right? No. It's sort of, it's very fundamental stuff. So that's the kind of model. So sort of in summary, it's an open source model, which is inventive in itself. It looks at employee experience and how you influence that, with a view that will drive employee engagement, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not one of these things that says, okay, here's your employee engagement stuff, you work out how to solve it. It very much tells you these are the elements of employee experience you need to work on. Yeah. Focus on employee outcomes versus leadership, mm-hmm. normative questions, and simple language. And then on the other side are the kind of topic groups that it's broken into.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Mike.
That felt like I fired it all out there to the universe now.
Well, we can all rewatch it.
Well, also too, people can download the Genome project now, right? It's easily available.
Here's something I didn't tell you. For all our sign-ups, they already received the white paper.
Oh, that's good.
So
they didn't need to listen to me.
I hope they did anyway. While I have you here, do you want to tell us a little bit more about Joyous, Mike?
Okay, so just in the couple of minutes before we close this off, we might go into some questions. Yeah, so I guess that I've got 3 slides. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, sure. So we've got about 8 minutes to go. So don't worry.
Okay. Well, there's the dog. What we've done is we've basically taken the Genome project and
mm-hmm.
we've put it into our tool, right? So our tool already exists, but we just think, okay, why don't we do this? And Joyous, for people that don't know, is basically a conversational employee feedback tool. Mm-hmm. Right? So if you're an employee, it feels like you're using WhatsApp or Messenger or SMS or something. It's like a left-right dialogue.
You're suggesting that basically the 2-part questions that you mentioned earlier, that second part is designed within Joyous to be leading to a conversation?
Yeah, I'll have to show it to you when we get a chance, Tom, because what it basically does is it just drives a conversational piece, which then once you start the conversation, you can kind of get involved in it. It's attributable feedback, right? So it's using the Genome as an attributed feedback mechanism, so it provides a steady cadence around that. The cool thing is every time you have an interaction, so we send out 1 question a week at the mm-hmm. moment, and the clients that are using the XGP, and 1 question a week provides this kind of cadence of kind of feedback that kind of builds up over time, and then we start to get summary metrics for your team or your division or your business unit or whatever, organised around the topics of the Genome project which we're talking about. Mm-hmm. I can see a question coming up on my screen there. Shall mm-hmm. I answer that, or shall I? I'll just show one more slide here, right?
Yeah, sure.
So this is if you drill down into culture and environment, you can see that the elements which we were talking about, right?
Yes, clarity, work environment, and empowerment.
And you can kind of see how they're going and how they're measured and so on.
So each of the sub-realms have got their own proprietary scale: vague, clear, restricting, enabling, blameless, responsible. Okay, so basically all of the individual modules have got their own sort of scale to describe what's going on.
This is designed so that if you're a people manager, mm-hmm. you can kind of see what's happening in your team, right?
What do you mean by people manager? Somebody who is sort of of lower management who has 3 people reporting to them, or a CEO?
So anyone really. It was a bad
that's
term
great.
to use, right? So it doesn't matter if I've got 3 people. I can see for my 3 people what this looks like, or if I'm the CEO of maybe 10,000 people in my organisation, I can see it kind of summarize for that.
Do you always have to see it in an aggregated fashion? Is it like, this is how my 10,000 people feel about culture and environment, or can you drill down by, I don't know, I only want to see the people who are based in New Zealand, or only...
Yeah, it's 2018, Dom. Yeah, you can cut it up
I
in
guess.
any way you want, right? So it has some really smart filters. And look, I'll throw up a web address for it in the comments so people can come and have a look at it.
Great, thank you for that.
So this question here, do you want to...
From Kevin, thank you for your question, Kevin, is can you elaborate a bit more on whether feedback should be anonymous or not, please?
Right, okay. We didn't cover this topic because this topic could take up a whole webinar by itself. But
Here's our topic for the next webinar when you come around.
Yeah, I'll just quickly comment on that. So, there's benefits for anonymous feedback and attributed feedback, but I'm personally a fan of attributed feedback. And it's some of the work that was done in the XGP, but I don't think it's published as part of the results, but just shows that in some kind of unexpected way or counterintuitive way, anonymous feedback is actually more honest than attributed feedback. Right, so there's this idea of psychological distance. So when I'm sitting here with you, it's very, very hard for me to lie. It's a human thing. It's hard to lie.
You could try, but I would figure it out.
Yeah. You have lovely hair, and so that was not a lie. So the thing about that is that when you have put some more psychological distance in it. So when we're together, there's no psychological distance. Put some more psychological distance in it. Like I'm sending you an email, like to say, I'm running late. Because there's been a car crash. Well, I'm actually it's much easier for me to lie in that environment.
Rather than to come clean and say, I snoozed about 12 times.
I just kept pressing snooze, and I had a leisurely breakfast. And then if you imagine the biggest psychological distance you can get, well, that's kind of anonymous feedback on a survey. Yeah, and the thing is that I don't actually really care about that feedback that much because no one knows it comes from me, so I'm not going to actually put that much effort into it. And so you kind of get this thing where anonymous feedback has less effort. It's more likely to just sort of stimulate the trolls. But then the last part of it is it's just not actionable. So while you might have some benefits, and there's definitely benefits in whistleblowing environments and so on, but those are things you should probably deal with separately than your kind of feedback mechanism. But those benefits are greatly outweighed by the fact that I can't actually action stuff. So if I sit there and I don't know, you send me feedback that says that I don't know that there's oil in the car park, then I can go, okay, Dom, let's work out how we can fix it. Whereas if you just sort of grumble away, say there's always oil in the car park, I don't know which car park of the 14 car parks 14 parking buildings that Joyce owns. So anyway, that's the kind of that's the answer. Hopefully, that answers Kevin's question.
I guess from my personal experience, I have always been somebody who has no problem with putting my name where my opinion is. So I'm not surprised that people would have that sort of view as well. What's the science behind it that you mentioned earlier? Is there something that we can discuss maybe in another round of the webinar?
The science on anonymity.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So like I said, it's a topic of itself. So if you want to invite me back, I'm happy to come and chat about that. And so what I will just do, I will put the details of Joyous in the chat, right? So
please do so.
Hang on a second here, just so that if anyone wants to visit that, they can. There we go.
Please. Are there any other questions? We have another minute left, so in case anyone else has any questions, please don't hesitate to fire away. For everybody else who came, who doesn't have any questions, thank you very much for your time. You will be able to find this recording in a sort of tinned up fashion on YouTube. I will send you the link later. I will also reach out to all of you individually to just, see whether you have any questions, whether you are sort of at the stage where you go, this seems really useful, but how do I make this work in my company? How do I make it useful? Let's have a chat about it.
I've got one last request.
Please, Mike.
So it's an open source project, right? So it just means that and if I'll give you the details so you can send the it's stored in GitHub, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that if anyone actually wants, because we love people using it, but we love people contributing and giving feedback too, right? And that's the whole point of this, versus your kind of more traditional monolithic surveys, is that anyone wants to input into this can. And so we've already got great input from lots of, like I said, academics and practitioners and so on. They're all listed in the kind of contributors there. But it would be really great that if anyone has any input into it about how this works in different environments, it's really useful. And that's the thing I've loved about this so far, is finding out how it works in supermarkets versus construction, etc.
Given that currently on exjournal.net we are at 35 articles from 16 contributors.
Wow.
Obviously, if there are some of you out there who say, look, I have opinions, I would like to share these opinions, please get in there.
Yeah, congratulations on the Exjournal. I'm
Thank you very much. Cool. Thank you for your time, everyone. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
And we'll
Thanks,
see
Tom.
you again in a few weeks for the next one. Bye bye.